Hi, and welcome back to the Fantasy Football Profits. I'm so happy to finally be back in a video after quite a long time here on break. First of all, we just wanted to thank you guys. We're coming near kind of towards the end of the season, and we just wanted to thank you for your support. It's been far better a year than we were expecting. I remember we posted our first video back in like June or July, and it was like, man, I can't wait till we have a video with 100 views. And now look, we're getting thousands of views of video, and we're so excited building such a strong community. We get lots of comments of advice and things that people want us to work on and things that we want to work on. So very frustrating for people probably. Oh, we wish they had better audio. We wish they do timestamps, whatever it might be. It's been a busy year. These are things we're going to implement in the off season. Keep the advice coming. Of course, keep it positive. Don't crush our souls or anything. But we just wanted to thank you guys and let you know we're going to stay involved in the off season. We're going to do lots of videos, very in-depth philosophy videos, really diving into the stats. Going to keep things going. News with mock drafts and combines and trades and free agency and all sorts of different things. So we're going to kind of keep things rolling throughout the off season as much as we can, especially of course playoffs. We'll be running a playoff challenge. We'll post a video about that, so don't worry too much about it, but just know, keep looking for that video. It's going to be a fun challenge for everybody to do together. We're going to put in a lineup, and hopefully we'll be able to beat everybody.
And it's free.
And
you have an
free.
opportunity to win some free t-shirts. So
yeah, exactly. And we'll talk more about that in the video, but as always, thank you guys so much for your support. Today, as you know, because you clicked on the video, waiver wire pickups. Before we get into that, we're going to talk about early injury concerns. Now, maybe some guys might get injured in the middle of the week. Maybe some guys on this list might end up not being hurt. But we talk about Antonio Brown, hurt his calf and was taken to the hospital. We believe right now it looks like it's partially torn and will most likely miss next week and possibly even more. Another guy is Rex Burkhead, who hurt his knee and was immediately ruled out of next game. Nothing too serious, but is most likely ruled out, as they've said so far. Another thing to consider, as we were talking about a little bit earlier, is weather reports. We talked about like the Colts-Bills game last week, so not this week, but the week before. That is extreme weather really affected quarterbacks and receiver statistics, and it was 100% a ground game. So if you're kind of you have guys playing in an outdoor game, check to make sure there's not going to be a crazy storm. That really threw off some people and how their starters did. So I guess I don't have anything more to say before we get into it. You did all the research, so you're going to do most of the talking for this.
Yeah, I did most of the research. You know, the one thing that we'd say at this point, once again, congratulations. If you're watching this, you're probably in the Super Bowl, so congratulations for you. The waiver wire video, we didn't get as deep, and here's why. At this point, if you've made it to the Super Bowl, you did it probably because you have a good roster. And if you have a good roster, then you're probably not needing some of these guys to consider. So here's some names to consider. But what we'd really encourage you is you probably best spend your time studying the start-sit video, looking at matchup plays for the week. And so let's get into some running backs that you may want to consider if you're in a pinch right now. So the first running back is Kern Williams. He's available in 65% of leagues. As we know, Adrian Peterson is out for the year. He's went on the IR with a neck injury. This week coming up, Williams plays the New York Giants, who allow the 5th most points to running backs. Now, if you study the last 3 weeks, they're not been afraid to use him. His carries have been 16, 20, and 17, so they give him a volume of carries. Now, his yards per carry haven't been great. He hasn't performed extremely well, but he's what we would call a volume play in a decent matchup. So for that reason, Williams is a decent play. He's going to get a lot of carries, probably 15 to 20 in that game. I would consider him kind of a running back 3 with this matchup. Another guy out there is Duke Johnson. He's available in 26% of leagues. He's had touchdowns back-to-back weeks. And on the year, he's got 70 catches. So this guy's been a PPR giant. He's been huge. 70 catches for the year. Now, I would only consider playing him in a flex position if you're in a PPR league. But for some of you out there, he'd be a nice flex play in a PPR league, available in 26% of leagues. Another guy out there is Crowell, who's actually running really, really well. He right now is available in 21% of leagues. Today on 5 carries, he had 72 yards. He continues to play well. This is about the 6th week in a row that he's run physical. He's running hard. He's looking good. Now, the one thing that hurts him right now, he's handcuffed with a bad quarterback. If anything's really hurting his value, it's that Kaiser's not a very good quarterback. The offense stalls out a lot, and they fall behind. They've got to throw the ball a lot, but he's playing really, really well. This week he plays Chicago Bears, who allow the 14th fewest points to running back. So he's running well. He is handcuffed by a bad quarterback. He has a tougher matchup, but for some of you out there, Crowell sits around a running back 3.
Now this next guy, sorry I'm going to interrupt you a little bit. Excited about him. Just some news with now that Rex Burkhead is out, Dion Lewis is a great option. You know why you did the research, but believe he's out there in a few leagues. I feel like he's going to be a great option this week. A guy I just personally am excited about.
Yeah, he's a guy that we've talked about a lot. He's available in only about 12% of leagues. But here's why we're focusing on him. Rex Burkhead left today with a knee injury. We don't know the extent of it yet. Now, if he misses any time, that's going to be a huge bump to Dion Lewis. And what we've discussed is that Dion Lewis has what we call a high floor but a low ceiling. He's in a good offense. He's consistent. He gets good production, but he's limited because they spread the ball around there a lot. Of course, if Rex Burkhead gets out, that's a huge bump to his value. In fact, in the last 6 weeks, I should say, or in the last 4 weeks, he's had 6 touchdowns. And so Rex been getting all the goal line carries, but if he's out, a lot of those goal line carries could go to Dion Lewis. So that made a huge bump in his value. That gives him a much higher ceiling. So Dion Lewis is someone you may want to consider out there.
Definitely wait to see if Rex Burkhead is out. There's a chance he still plays. However, it doesn't look like it. But if Rex Burkhead plays, then Dion Lewis becomes less valuable again. So just make sure to be keeping an eye on that.
So another guy out there is Kenyan Drake. I really like this guy, not just for this year. I think this guy's got huge value next year. I think he could be the starting running back for the Miami Dolphins next season. We've been big on him. In fact, when they made that trade, a lot of people thought Williams was going to be the guy. We went out on a limb often and said, no, Drake is a better running back. He's got the skills. We said he has the talent and the skill to be a running back one. I think he's proven that. He's kind of vindicated us in that regard. Right now, he's available in 16% of leagues, which is not highly available, but he's proven to be a legitimate running back one. In fact, if you look over the past 3 weeks, he's averaged over 20 fantasy points per game. His yards per carry have been 4.9, so he's been excellent. He's using the passing game also, which is an added bonus. This guy's got huge value, not just in this year, but in dynasty leagues. If you're in a dynasty league and he's out there, you need to put this guy on your bench. I think he's a guy that's going to move up, and he's rapidly climbing up the dynasty charts as far as running backs to consider next season.
Yeah, that's absolutely huge. If you're in a keeper or a dynasty league, he's a guy to stash, man. I think he's going to be great. He's a guy I have on one of my teams, and I'm probably going to keep him for sure. But, we'll see how things really roll out. But definitely worth a spot on your bench.
Yeah, love the guy. So the Vikings running backs, let's take a look at them. Well, next week, Vikings play Green Bay. Should be a good matchup, although the Vikings right now have clinched the division, so we're excited about that. We're both Vikings fans here. They're playing the Green Bay Packers, allow the 6th most points to running backs. So this is a matchup that is very running back friendly. So I want to take both running backs for the Vikings discuss. Look at Jerick McKinnon at this point. So Jerick McKinnon is available in 20% of leagues. Now his value really isn't PPR leagues at this point. Now today he had a huge game in terms of the passing game. He had 7 catches for 114 yards. Now if you look at his carries in the game have actually dropped the last couple games. So his carries are down. He doesn't have a lot of value in standard leagues, but he has a solid play as a flex play in a PPR league. Jerick McKinnon out there in about 20% of leagues. Then the other guy out there is Latavius Murray. He had a bump in the road last week. He really struggled. I know that disappointed a lot of people. Although when he played Carolina in our start sit video, we actually said stay away from him and we had some concerns. Going into this week, we had a few concerns too. The offensive line for the Vikes is banged up, but they fared pretty well. He's available in 13% of leagues out there. And he got back to his double-digit carries. He had 20 carries, 76 yards, and a touchdown. He's had 6 TDs in the last 8 games. Going into next week, he's a running back 2 that you can trust. Let's look at the Bengals running backs right now. Well, this is a great matchup next week for the Bengals running backs. Whoever it turns out to be, they play Detroit. Now, Detroit allows the 2nd most points to running backs. Let's look at Joe Mixon. Now, Joe Mixon is available in 13% of leagues. Now, he was on track to play this week. It seemed like he was going to play, and something happened. He was ruled out. So it turned out that Bernard got the carries. Now, if Mixon is back, if he's ready to go, he's going to be the future of this team. He's going to be the guy that's going to get the carries. When he's back, they're going to really evaluate what they have moving forward, and so they're going to do that by allowing him to be the starting back. He's the guy they're looking forward to the future. So if Joe Mixon is back, is healthy, he'll get a majority of the carries. He's a great start next week. I would say you could actually roll with him as a running back too. He's actually been improving. He's been more productive. Before he got his concussion, he had back-to-back games where his yard per carry were over 4. He had one game over 100 yards. So Joe Mixon is a guy that you can trust if he's back. If he's out, that brings us to Giovanni Bernard. And Bernard's available in 52% of leagues. And he scored double-digit points in fantasy the last 3 games that he's filled in for Mixon. He's actually filled in quite nice. So keep an eye on that. Obviously, if Mixon plays, don't pick up Bernard. But if Mixon has to miss another week, Bernard's a great play as a running back 2 next week. Wayne Gallman. Wayne Gallman is available in 95% of leagues. Next week he plays Arizona, who allow the ninth fewest points to running back, so it's kind of a tougher matchup there. But the last 2 games, he's really kind of taken over for Orleans Darkwa in terms of total use. Now, last couple games, in fact, if you look back about 4 games there, Darkwa has really just progressively got worse. Now, the last 2 games, if you look at Wayne Gallman, his yards per carry have been 4.9, and so he's running the ball effectively. In fact, if you look at his numbers last 2 games ago, he had 12 carries for 59 yards. He had 7 catches for 40 yards. And then this week he had 8 carries for 39 yards and 6 catches for 40 yards. So he's a guy that can run the ball pretty well. He's used a lot in the passing game. He's been pretty effective. He's not a great play because he still shares carries with Darkwa and they have a rougher matchup. But for teams that are desperate, he's worth a look. I see him kind of as a running back 3 in PPR leagues. Peyton Barber. He's another guy that I like this guy a lot. But what we need to do, it's not Sunday night here. We're going to have to watch Monday night's game and just see how it plays out. You're going to have to keep an eye on his targets, his carries, how many plays he's actually on the field. So kind of have to monitor that a little bit. He is available on 67% of leagues. Now, last game, we really said that Martin, the guy, needs to get shut down. He has struggled all year. He's been brutal. I think his yards per carry sit around 3.1, 3.2. He's just been extremely ineffective. But for whatever reason, he came back. The coach gave Martin the start. And through the first quarter and a half, he struggled once again. He fumbled late in the second quarter. After that, they brought in Peyton Barber, who outcarried him 10 carries to 0 the rest of the game, and he actually has outperformed him moving forward. And so I would imagine that after that performance and the way that Martin's performed, this should be Barber's team going forward. The only one who know that, of course, is watching tomorrow night's game.
Yeah, this is another guy who's huge. Pick up in a keeper of dynasty league, sit on and see. He could be the guy next year. Only guy is long term that we see, could really do anything, and might not be, even if you're looking, he's just not the choice and not a guy you want to roll with. I mean, you're probably going to be, if you're playing at this point, it's either finals or semifinals, maybe, but it's probably a championship match for you, and I can understand, I don't really trust Peyton Barber, but definitely worth a spot on your bench. Guy shows potential, sit him on the offseason and see. He's just a guy we kind of like a little bit.
Yeah. Now, next week, Barber plays Carolina, who are tough against the run. And so I see him kind of as a running back 3. A lot of that depends upon his Monday night performance and the coach carry distribution in terms of how that's going to break down. So keep an eye on that, but he's definitely a guy you could look for. Now they got their CJ Anderson. This guy carries a ton of risk to him. There's a lot of risk going on, but some of you are very desperate out there for a running back. Why is there a lot of risk? Well, 1, he's been very inconsistent. 2, the Denver quarterbacks are not playing well. And he's been involved in a running back by committee pretty much the last half of the season. Now, with that said, his carries have increased the last 4 weeks. In fact, his carries went from 5 to 15 to 22 to last week he had 30 carries. In fact, he had 30 carries for 158 yards, so he had a good week. Now, this week he plays the Redskins, who allow the 13th most points to running backs. Now, he's somebody that's kind of hard to trust at this point, so he's not what you would consider running back 2. He could be a running back 3 depending upon your league size and your scoring.
Mm-hmm.
Look at the Jacksonville running back situation there. Well, you got Yeldon and Ivory. They both are widely available, and they both played a lot today because Fournette was out. So how do you begin to evaluate that? Well, when Fournette's out and those two begin to play, it's really a running back by committee, which devalues both of them. Now, if they end up playing next week, if Fournette's out again, here's what you're going to see with that. Ivory's going to get a bulk of the carries, and Yeldon's going to be used in the passing game. That's typically their role in there. Now, they do play San Francisco, who allows the 3rd most points to running backs, but I would say it's probably not worth risking it because you can't consistently trust either one of those guys in terms of getting volume, carries, or targets. So I would probably just stay away, and if you're a Leonard Fournette fan, hope that he is back. The New York Jets running back situation, take a look at that. Forte and Powell. Well, they play the Chargers, who allow the 15th most points to running backs. Now, this is really running back by committee. Another one of those situations it's really hard to pin down from week to week. You're really rolling the dice. And then to make things worse, it's kind of running back by committee with Forte and Powell. Well, this week, Elijah McGuire had increased roles, so now they've actually complicated and muddied the waters even more. This whole situation is really sketchy, and I would really think it's best to avoid it at this point.
Yeah, exactly. I think avoid has got to be the best thing to do, probably the only thing to do until we see some major changes.
Just a couple of running backs to avoid out there. And the reason why I brought this up is they're widely available. I know a lot of people have been rolling week to week for plug-in plays on these guys. But Frank Gore, I like Frank Gore, great running back. He's 34 years old. He's really a volume play, not in a great offense. They're not afraid to give him the ball 15, 20 times. But besides that big game he had in the snow in Buffalo, and even then his yards per carry were extremely low. He's somebody who doesn't have a good matchup. He's not in a good offense. Stay away from Frank Gore. Then the other guy out there is Samaje Perine. He had 2 games where he really blew up. Looked like maybe he was going to be the answer. His yards per carry went up. You take away those 2 games, though, he struggled all year. And the last 2 games, he's really got back to the way he was early in the season. He's been pretty brutal. He has a tough matchup coming up here. Plays Denver, who allowed the 6th fewest points to running back, so I'd stay away from Samaje Perine at this point.
Yeah, so that's it for our running backs. That was quite a load. A little bit shorter section now. We're going to go over quarterbacks. Like I said, that was quite a bit to go over. As always, if you guys have questions, feel free to ask in the comment section below. We love building that community. But I guess we'll get right into it. Who's the first quarterback you're going to talk about?
Well, we're going to stick right to the hometown Vikings here.
Hometown pick all the way.
Case Keenum. Available in 26% of leagues. He plays Green Bay, allowed the 14th most points to quarterbacks. This is a guy that really looked like a journeyman early in the year, a guy that I wasn't really excited about. He's really playing good football right now. He's doing a lot of things that are impressive. Last 6 games, he got 13 touchdown passes, only 4 interceptions. You can trust him if you need to plug him in as a quarterback at this point. He's got a good matchup on the road. It should be a higher scoring affair. I believe in that game. I like Case Keenum at this point.
I totally agree. Although maybe we're biased.
Maybe we're biased, and that's okay. Go Vikes. Joe Flacco. I know that you've been a guy in the past that have liked Baltimore a little bit. Joe Flacco is a guy that's available in 82% of leagues. This week he plays the Colts, who allow the 7th most points to quarterbacks. Now, he had a really terrible start to the year. He was brutal for about the first 12 games of the year, maybe first 10, I would say. He's really turned the corner. In fact, the last 3 games, he's averaging over 270 passing yards per game. And during that same 3-game stretch, he's got 5 touchdown passes to only 1 interception. So he's a guy, based on matchup, that's worth a plug and play this week. Joe Flacco, widely available out there. Another guy out there, Blake Bortles. He's available in 46% of leagues. I've kind of been hating on this guy, honestly. I'm not a huge fan of Blake Bortles, but I have to admit, the last few games, he's playing really well. He's become a viable option in the right matchups at this point. So this week, he plays San Francisco, who allowed the 3rd most points to quarterbacks. Now, the last 3 weeks, he's got 7 touchdown passes to 0 interceptions. And during that same 3-week stretch, he's averaging 300 passing yards per game. So keep an eye on Blake Bortles if you need somebody. So Carson Wentz went down, and my son actually is going to school out there in Fargo, North Dakota, and so that's huge Wentz country, right?
Yeah, huge Wentz country. As we joked, the flags were at half-mast when Wentz got hurt. Everyone was very distraught as he's from NDSU out there.
Yeah, so that brings it this week. They rolled out with Nick Foles. A lot of question marks, right?
A lot of question marks.
Not only for fantasy players, but for the Philadelphia Eagles fans as a whole. Well, many people considered starting him this week. I had people write us asking, hey, should I start Nick Foles? We advised against it. We say he needs a prove-it game. And the reason why we need to see that is we want to know, is the coach getting the same freedom or the plays that he gave to Wentz? Or did they decide to run the ball more and go heavy running? How rusty is he going to be? There's a lot of unanswered questions. And we felt playing him this week without being proven was just too risky for you guys.
Especially in the playoffs. At this point in the season, these games aren't just, oh, I lose or I win. These games are, your season's over. So that's a huge risk to take. Very interesting. I mean, you talk about prove 'em games. Definitely proved it. Stepped up. You couldn't ask much more from a guy in his first game and for a while.
Exactly. And I'll give you the same advice. I would stay away from him. If the situation did the same thing again, I would say that. With that said, he had a great game today, 237 yards and 4 TD passes. Now, a little word of caution out there before we get really excited about Nick Foles. Once again, he played well. I think he'll be a viable option for some of you, but he played a very, very bad New York Giants pass defense. Now, this week he plays Oakland, who allowed 11th most points to quarterbacks, so they're not as bad as the Giants, although they certainly are vulnerable to pass. So I think Nick Foles is a guy that you could probably roll with out there. Tyrod Taylor, another one who's available in 62% of leagues, plays the New England Patriots, allow the 5th most points to quarterbacks. Now, the one thing to consider in this game, but I would imagine that most likely Buffalo's going to be playing from behind, need to throw the ball a lot. So there'll be a lot of garbage time statistics if you're somebody who wants to take a chance on Tyrod Taylor. Personally, I'm not a big fan of Tyrod Taylor, but for some of you, he's going to be worth a look this week.
Yeah, exactly. Not great, but doable if you need them, I guess, would be the way to explain that.
Yeah. So now Christian's going to give you some quarterbacks, so we would just simply say to avoid this week unless you absolutely have no other options.
All right, so the first quarterback that we're going to suggest to avoid this week, as tempting as it is Jimmy Garoppolo. Now, we were just talking today, and we agree that Jimmy Garoppolo looks great. I mean, that 49ers team was a mess. They've won 3 straight. You got to give him credit. He's certainly a good quarterback, and we think he has a good future in the NFL. However, they have to play Jacksonville this week. That's a really tough defense, and the 49ers are still really just not that good of a team. So any week to sit Garoppolo is definitely going to be this week. A guy to avoid. Another one is Derek Carr. He has to play Philadelphia Eagles, who play and give up the 9th fewest points to QBs. But more importantly, you're talking about he's just struggled in the last 4 games. He just hasn't looked good. If you look through his game log, the last 4 games, it doesn't look like the Derek Carr that we all knew, especially coming into the season. He's very hyped and thought it was going to be a great year, and really has just come out and underperformed. Another guy is Blaine Gabbert to avoid, to play the New York Giants, give the 2nd most points.
Well, the thing about that, he's got a great matchup, but if you look at Blaine Gabbert, first 2 games at Philly looked good, but he's gotten progressively worse. He's looked like the Blaine Gabbert that we expected. And so here's what I get: a great matchup. He could go out there, he could blow up, have a huge game. But are you willing to risk your Super Bowl championship having Blaine Gabbert at the quarterback? Probably not.
Yeah, thank you for saving my tongue's a little bit tied. Having trouble here. My brain's getting a little ahead of me. Haven't filmed these videos in a while. You get rusty. Another guy, speaking of rusty, is Eli Manning. He hasn't played great lately, but last game he played great today, basically. He had 434 yards, 3 touchdown passes. Great game, but we talked about it. Where did that come from? He's just not that good of a quarterback. We look at he's only gotten 1 touchdown pass in the 3 previous games against I believe you called it some quarterback friendly teams, against teams who give up a lot of points to quarterbacks, and that is despite that he's playing Arizona, who gives up the 12th most points to QBs. We're going to say avoid Eli Manning. Also avoid Jay Cutler, who is going against the Kansas City Chiefs, who give up the 8th most points to a QBs. Nice matchup. However, we talked about played terrible lately last week, 3 interceptions to 0 touchdowns against Buffalo, versus Tennessee, 92 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 pick, 1 touchdown, 3 interception, and only 83 yards against Tampa Bay. It's just not a great, not a guy that you can trust. He definitely has a high ceiling. We see what he did against the New England Patriots with 3 touchdowns, no picks, 263 yards, but just not really sure what we're getting with the guy. The other one is just some hype recently on Mitchell Trubisky. Going to want to avoid him. He's gotten a lot better lately. He's definitely stepped it up. Seems to be getting used to the NFL. However, not a great, still not quite there as far as fantasy value goes. And as always, we would say avoid Denver and Houston quarterbacks. It's just a mess there right now.
Yes.
So that's it for quarterbacks to avoid. Now we're going to move on to wide receivers.
Sterling Shepard. Now, well, we've talked a lot about Sterling Shepard. I love this guy, and I feel bad. A lot of you started him last week, and he just disappeared. And for that, we're sorry. It's going to happen. Even the greatest receivers have off weeks. Now, he's 29% available in most leagues. He's a guy that is very underrated. This guy is very talented. This week, he goes off, has 11 catches, 139 yards, and a TD. Now, he's going to have off games at times. He will disappear from time to time because of Eli's inconsistent play. And because they have no other good wide receivers on that team, therefore defenses can double team him or they can slide coverage over to help him. So every once in a while he will disappear, but he has a legitimate wide receiver 1 type talent. He is very good. He's the number 1 weapon there. He's going to get a lot of targets. He's out there in basically 30% of leagues. He's a guy that you could pick up and play as a wide receiver 3. He's very talented. Some of the other games we'll look at this year, besides today, he had a huge game. Earlier, he had 7 catches for 133 yards in the TD. He had another game earlier this year where he had 11 catches, 142 yards. So he's had some big games this year. Now he plays the Cardinals, who got up to 14th fewest points to wide receivers. Now he might see Patrick Peterson, although Patrick Peterson is a good cornerback, but he hasn't shut down all the wide receivers he's faced. So I think he's a guy that can go out there and have a decent game. I wouldn't be that surprised to see 6 catches, 80 yards, and a touchdown from him.
Mm-hmm.
Another guy out there is Robert Woods. He's 25% available in all leagues. He plays Tennessee, who allows the 9th most points to wide receivers. Now, today he came back. He was gone for a couple games. He had a shoulder injury. Today he comes back. He has 6 catches, 45 yards, and a touchdown. So he had a decent day. He didn't have a great day. But here's why he didn't have a big day. They absolutely destroyed Seattle. That game was done at halftime. I believe it was 24-0 at halftime. They came out almost immediately after the kickoff and made it 31-0. They just didn't need to throw the ball a lot. And so I expected if they would have had to throw the ball more, he probably would end up with 100 yards and probably 8 catches, something in that range. He's Goff's favorite target. 3 games prior to his injury, he had an average of 100 receiving yards per game, and he had 4 touchdowns during that stretch. So he's a guy that's very talented out there and very good possession, so you need to pick him up. The guy up there is Marquise Goodwin. He's available in 32% of leagues. Now he's got a tough matchup this week. He's playing the Jaguars. But today he had another big game. He had 10 catches, 114 yards. In the last 3 weeks with Jimmy Garoppolo at quarterback, like I said, he looked really good. I think they found their franchise quarterback there. Really like the guy. Since Jimmy's been at quarterback, he's averaging 100 receiving yards per game. He's had back-to-back weeks with double-digit targets. He has wide receiver 3 appeal. Even though it's a tough matchup, we know he's going to face Ramsey, so that's going to make it difficult for him, but he's their number 1 guy at this point. Another wide receiver to consider out there is Cole, wide receiver for the Jaguars. He's 6'1" rookie out of Western Kentucky. Is available in 96% of leagues. He's had touchdowns 3 weeks in a row. He's been a little bit under the radar. Today he had 7 catches, 186 yards in a TD. Last week he had 99 yards. Now, kind of what I would say for this guy is he's really on my radar at this point. Although I certainly probably wouldn't trust him in a Super Bowl next week if you needed him. But he's definitely a guy that you need to have on your radar. He's definitely a guy that has value in a dynasty league. So keep an eye on Cole. He might be worth a play in very, very deep leagues if you're desperate. Rashard Matthews, available in 27% of leagues. He's Marcus Mariota's number 1 wideout today. He had 6 catches, 95 yards, and a touchdown. Next week, he plays San Francisco, allowed the 17th most points to wide receivers. He's got wide receiver 3 appeal this week. It's Cooper Kupp out there. He's available in 23% of leagues, plays Tennessee, like we said earlier, who allowed the 9th most points to wide receivers. He's another one who had a kind of a quiet day today, but that was due mostly to the fact that they destroyed the Seahawks, that they didn't need to throw a lot. He's having a very nice rookie season at this point. There's Nelson Agholor. Nelson's available in 18% of leagues. He plays Oakland, who allowed the 13th most points to wide receivers. He's got 8 touchdowns on the year. In fact, he's had 3 touchdowns in the last 4 games. And today he did very well. Even though Wentz wasn't quarterback, he had 7 catches, 59 yards, and a touchdown. So Nelson Agholor is a guy out there that you can roll with. So the Pittsburgh wide receivers. You want to update real quick on the injury there?
Excuse me, what was that?
You want to update the injury on that real quick?
Yeah, so again, as we talked about Brown's calf injury, very serious. They took him to the hospital. ESPN's Adam Schefter reports Antonio Brown has partially torn calf muscle. Brown is unlikely to play in Week 16. Now, unlikely to play in Week 16 is the polite way of saying he's not playing in Week 16, so don't get your hopes up. So now we look at, just for this coming week, what wide receivers, in Pittsburgh, what are you expecting them to do now that that number 1 target is gone?
Yeah, so that's going to open up a lot of opportunities for owners out there. So first of all, they got a great matchup. They play Houston, who allowed the 8th most points to wide receivers. So you got to think about Martavis Bryant and Juju Smith-Schuster in terms of where they're at. So let's look at Martavis Bryant in this one. Obviously, both those wideouts, their targets are going to go up as they're going to get targets that were intended for Antonio Brown. In fact, Antonio Brown had led the league. I think he had his 100th catch today in the game, and he's leading the league in targets going into this game. Well, Martavis Bryant's available in 45% of leagues. Today he had 4 catches, 59 yards, and a touchdown, so he's a guy out that you could roll as a wide receiver 3 next week. And then Juju Smith-Schuster is available in 15% of leagues. Today he had a big game. 6 catches, 115 yards with Brown out. In fact, he had a key catch that helped get them in a position where they could have tied the game or won the game late in there. Some tight ends you may want to consider if you're desperate, if you need somebody out there. Greg Olsen, he's available in 28% of leagues. He was another one. I got to give you credit. You rolled the dice on him. I, on the other hand, am a little more conservative, and I told a lot of people that you need to really see a game where he can prove it. Before today, he'd been back for 4 weeks and had 2 catches. Kind of re-aggravated a foot injury that he had, and so I really need a prove-it game from him where I could just see that he's back. Today he had that prove-it game. He had 9 catches, 116 yards, and a touchdown in a very tough matchup against a team that typically doesn't give up a lot of points to tight ends. He went out there and had a great game. Another guy out there is Jack Doyle, available in 16% of leagues. He's got a quality start next week. And then Eric Ebron, available in 68% of the leagues. He had a touchdown today, and he was a guy the first 4 or 5 weeks. He actually went on paper and said that, you know what, I'm playing myself right out of a job.
Yeah.
And so he admitted he'd struggled early on, but he's really turned it around. He's gotten more and more involved. He's become more consistent. He's got a good matchup this week. You can trust him.
All right, the final thing we're going to talk about is some defenses. Obviously, at this point in the season, there aren't any top-notch defenses out there. Rather, we're going to talk about some widely available defenses or defenses that are available in over half of all leagues if you're desperate. The Washington Redskins versus Denver is a good matchup that we like. Chicago versus Cleveland, and the Kansas City Chiefs versus Miami are all defenses that we would start if we're desperate. Of course, not the best options out there, but at this point in the season, all the good defenses are typically scooped up and there's not too many options. All right, so moving on, we just ask you guys, thank you for watching the video. Thank you for supporting us, obviously. Like the video, share it, subscribe, and hit the notification button. That one is huge, guys. Going into the playoffs, we're going to be posting playoff videos, doing the playoff competition, playoff challenge, whatever you want to call it. But even more importantly, in the off season, if you hit that notification button, we're going to be posting right as we hear about news, trades, and free agency, and all sorts of things that happen. So if you click that right as we post the video, right as we know, you'll know, and you'll be able to stay on top of things. It's going to be a very exciting time this off season. Thank you so much for watching. You guys have a great day. God bless.